So hi guys, welcome back to Ponderings from Palm Coast. I'm Mark Webb, and today I am so excited to have the publisher, editor, owner of the Observer newspaper, Brian McMillan. Thanks for coming.
Very happy
I
to be here.
appreciate it. We've been working hard for a while now to try to find some time to squeeze you in. Before we just get into the weeds of it, why don't you share a little bit about how you got here to Palm Coast? So I also, one of these days I'm going to ask somebody and go, well, I've been born here for 40 years and I've been here my whole life. I've yet to meet that person. I think Tony Adamar is I think I pronounced
Amaral.
Amaral is a career guy here. But how did you end up here?
Well, it's really all connected with the Observer because from 2004 to 2006, I worked for the Observer Media Group in Sarasota area, and it was a great experience there. It was my first job right out of college at Brigham Young University, and so that's one place where I learned to never burn bridges. If you try to do well and leave on good terms, like I gave them 6 months notice before I was going to leave. I decided I wanted to go to graduate school. Got a master's of fine arts in creative nonfiction writing, which is kind of like a more, it's like blending journalism with like a creative writing kind of, sensibility. So I left there, and after I got my degree it was 3 years at Northern Michigan University, which is in the Upper Peninsula, 200 inches of snow a year. So it was a pretty brutal change from Sarasota. But I grew up in Connecticut and I went to college in Utah, so it wasn't.
That's got to be a story all on its own.
It wasn't so shocking. But after I was planning on pursue the academic writing life. I had an agent. I was trying to, get this book published, which didn't work out. That's a whole other boring, terrible story. But I was teaching at a community college in Kansas. My parents lived there, so we moved in there for a few months while we were trying to figure out the next step. And while I was there, I got a call from the CEO of the Observer Media Group from Sarasota and said, "We're going to start a new print newspaper in Palm Coast." This was Matt Walsh, his brother John Walsh, who's been a longtime Palm Coast resident in the C section here. He wanted to start a Palm Coast Observer. And so he asked if I wanted to be the first managing editor of the paper. I was the sports editor before, but he had a lot of, we've had a great relationship, Matt and I. He's been a great mentor, and he had just thought highly enough of me to come bring me in. I think afterward probably realized that I didn't know what I was doing as much as he thought I did. But it worked out in the end.
Fake it till you make it, Brian.
Hey,
that's everybody's mantra nowadays.
That's part of the career path for everybody, I think.
Exactly.
But again, they were great. Matt and his wife Lisa were great mentors, and John just knew a lot about the dynamics of the city. He had a lot of great sales experience, and so he brought me on as the editor. And so I moved my family here and stayed for, I was the editor for 12 years. We started the Ormond Beach Observer in 2012 after the Palm Coast in 2010. And so after about 12 years, I decided I need to see if I could figure out a way to make more money. I had 5 children by then. And so I took a break away from journalism for about a year. I worked for my friend who was a general contractor, doing help him get organized basically, and do the contracts and bids and things like that. But then after about a year of that, I was not really that happy with the job, and so I started looking around at what else I would do next. I went back to John, said, my resume, what do you think my next job should be? And he said, how about my job? And it turned out that he and his brother were both kind of looking at possibly selling the paper. And they were actually very happy and relieved that maybe someone locally would want to buy it. And not only that, but a person who had been there from the beginning as the editor. It was kind of like a perfect fit to kind of keep the legacy going how it was and keep the brand how it was and everything else. So, yeah, my wife and I decided to take out a big loan and we bought the paper and here we are.
The leap of faith.
Indeed.
You practice that a lot, and I can
Yeah.
appreciate how you lean on that. Assume, and knowing Utah and having a lot of friends that are Jack Mormons, I don't see you that way. You're pretty passionate, and
I'm
you're
very
all
devout.
in.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
That's
has
right.
Been part of my life for.
And it has served you well.
Thank you.
And I applaud you, as I've said to you many times. The challenges today in reporting the news as it happens every 10 minutes lately, there's just always something going on, is something I think no previous news organizations have ever faced. Not one that I can remember, that the doubt, the question, and you said this recently, and I use this all the time, the confirmation bias of what you think must be true no matter what is presented in front of you, which goes directly to the challenge of running a newspaper in your case. And you've mentioned that before. And so now you're here. You've been here for 15 years. You've seen here in the great state of Florida a transitional period, not just with the politics, but the perception of the people that are reading your paper and have opinions. And I wonder how do you address that at the editorial level when you're looking to put your paper out and you see, 5 minutes before you get ready to print, something crazy could be happening, and so you're trying to just put out the news. How do you deal with that, with the fluidity?
Well, it's very challenging with a weekly newspaper because you live with it for 7 days, and so you want it to be relevant for the whole week if possible. So like last week, this is just a small example, but Brent Warrenoff is our sports reporter and associate editor, and he does other news and things like that. But we were brainstorming for, what's on people's minds, what do we want to write about, and we talked about the heat wave and like how is it impacting like high school football, how is it impacting other jobs around town, and so we were like getting, it was kind of like we weren't ready to dive into it. A few days passed, now we're like getting ready for the next week, and it's like, well, we better check the weather. And sure enough, it was supposed to go back to our normal like 88-ish degrees with a little a little thunderstorm for 10 minutes every day. So like by next Thursday, is it going to feel like it's irrelevant to talk about the heat wave anymore? And I think it was. So we just shifted gears. We just didn't cover it because it didn't fit in with the timing just right. And that's one hard part about what we do is like, the print is like, it costs a lot of money to make a print newspaper. That's what all of our resources are kind of based around. But yet we also want to be as relevant in the community as possible, which means we need to be publishing every day, every few hours online as well.
Right, exactly.
And so we have to like, sometimes we do unfortunately have to weigh like whether this is going to also work in print or not, and decide how many resources we can then, devote to it. But social media, we want to take advantage of every possible method to reach the readers. Not everybody wants print anymore. It used to be the only thing, but now we still are very strong in print. Northeast Florida is big. Like we recently expanded to add the hammock, and so it kind of shows that advertisers want print still. It's not just what readers want. The advertisers have to believe that the readers want it too to keep growing. But yeah, I do think that you do have to be always thinking about what are people going to want to read on Thursday. the next Thursday.
Right. So I wanted to touch on this before we got farther. Can you help me understand the sources of news? You said Ormond and Palm Coast, and you're expanding that as a source. Now you print a separate paper for each of those locations that are focused a little to that?
Basically, and it's changed from day one till now. It has changed quite a bit of like how many resources we'll put in different toward the different communities. But some people have asked me, why isn't it called the Flagler County Observer? And because we do try to be as comprehensive as possible. And I think just from day one, it was like, that's really what the big advertisers are looking for, is like if I just got a request to advertise from Verizon. They're not looking for Flagler County. They're looking for like cities. Like this is the biggest city in Volusia or Flagler.
Palm Coast is it's a big deal.
Right.
People don't know.
So usually the advertisers are saying, I want to reach the Palm Coast market, not the Flagler County market. So that's one reason, honestly, why we just stuck with Palm Coast from the beginning, and we haven't changed that since then. But I believe that what it says across the top of that paper is a really big deal. I think that it builds community to know that you've got a community newspaper. So the Ormond Beach paper saying Ormond Beach across the top is really important. We added the hammock about a month and a half ago. My goal in 2026 is that we would have a Flagler Beach banner across the top of an Observer and a Bunnell across the top of the Observer. Because I think, again, if you live in Bunnell or live in Flagler Beach, getting the Palm Coast Observer is only sort of relevant to you, even though we actually do cover the Flagler Beach City Commission on a fairly regular basis. Bunnell, not all that often, but I would like to. I think they deserve it, and we want to do that.
Well, they are the capital.
They are.
They're the
Crossroads.
county seat.
Right.
Of
Yeah.
Flagler.
But each one of the papers, there's a lot of crossover, like the Flagler County Commission, the crime news, the schools, the events, and the calendar, and real estate news. It really does impact like everybody. The Palm Coast City politics, it really only matters to Palm Coast residents. So what we do is we have like a fresh front page, and we have at least another half page worth of content inside that is dedicated just to that particular community. In Ormond Beach, we usually try to have like something almost every page throughout, because that's where about a third of our circulation is in Ormond Beach with that paper. So it is kind of a balance, but if you look in Palm Coast, you're going to see some Ormond Beach news. Partly it's because that's just the economics of it. Like it costs money to swap out every page and all that other stuff. I don't want to bore you with all the details of it, but
it's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, some people I think feel that it is a bad thing. I mean, I would think if you're looking at Palm Coast and then you see an Ormond Beach, centric news item, we're always thinking, will Palm Coast readers care about that or not? And if it's maybe a little bit, then we usually, because of the economics of the business, we usually leave it in. If it's absolutely not, then we try to figure out a way to rearrange the stories so that page can be swapped, and we do swap out some pages.
Sure. I mean, personally, I would love to be able to read in any of your newspaper where the decent restaurants are. Ormond Beach or Palatka or whatever, because they're not in Palm Coast.
The restaurant news has definitely always been a big one. And everybody knows this because the News Journal has a beat reporter that's dining at restaurants. And, that would be great. But some of our biggest stories over the years have been restaurants. Even like the first Chick-fil-A that opened in Palm Coast was like through the roof, the web traffic, So you wouldn't think that should be, as big of a driving force for us, but it is.
Well, when I'll speak for myself. When my wife and I just don't want to cook, and we have a little bit of extra money and we're looking to go to a restaurant, we start looking at reviews, whether they're online or wherever, to try to find some place that's good, and we go and try it. So there is people travel more than
Yep.
you would expect here,
Yeah.
and especially when you look at the age group and the people that are retired here. And so I would be remiss to not give you an opportunity to share and pat yourself on the back for all the donations and give backs that you've been doing based on people subscribing to your paper. And I didn't even know that existed till recently.
Well, it's a recent thing, really.
Well,
so-
but even it is. Tell us, it's like $53 a year to have it delivered right to your driveway. And then you give back some of that, or you are planning on it.
Well, yeah, no, we are. We made a donation to the food bank about a couple weeks ago, but basically, it's a really strange business model when it comes down to it. The fact that it's free is why it's all over town. At least that's the perception that we want, and I think that's the goal, is that anyone can get access to the print version whenever they want. Right now, and this is of this airing, but so if you're watching this someday in the future, maybe hopefully it's up. But we're publishing 9,000 copies of the Palm Coast paper and 1,000 in Hammock, and then 4,500 in Ormond Beach. Just if anybody wants to know. So usually that's double that for the number of readers, because usually 2 in a home, or the Dunkin' Donuts effect, it's passed along. So it's in the neighborhood of 29,000, 30,000 readers per week that the paper touches. But yeah, so it's free. We don't want anybody to forget that, because that's what the advertisers, that's why they feel confident that it's going to reach a big audience, is that it's free. It's all over the town. But if you do one on the driveway, it's $1 a week, and we brought that price down as much as we felt like we could at the time too. But so for $52, you can go on our website, sign up, and get it on your driveway. But there is some margin in that as well, and we're trying to increase the relevance and the interest in subscriptions, because everything is hopefully driven by the greater good. What makes us fulfill our mission the most? If people pick it up once a month, that's good. But if people pick up the paper every week, it's better for the advertisers, and it makes people feel more connected to the community if you get it every single week. So we want to encourage that. That's our primary reader. Our optimal reader is someone who gets it every single week. So how do you encourage that? Well, and then also figure out a way to help the community in other ways that we can. So of the $52, right, we for about 5 weeks, we're going to donate $20 for every new subscription or renewing. Just anyone who subscribes in any way for an annual subscription will donate $20 to the food bank. And we did that in Ormond and Palm Coast. So we donated $1,560 to the Grace Community Food Pantry, and about $700 and something to the Jerry Dolliner Food Bank in Ormond. So I went to both of them, handed the checks over. Actually, Jerry Dolliner, we had to mail it afterward. But trying to be accurate in everything I say. But
you're giving back.
Yes, we are.
And that is the message that I think, and I hear this from a lot of the people that listen to me and the people like you, I'm faced with that same kind of thing, to realize that if not today, in the foreseeable future, those donations by common people or through businesses are going to be the major source of support for future groups in need. We're just seeing the money drying up. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a lack of commitment from the city and the county and the administration. So I applaud you for that, and I wanted to make sure that I got that out there.
Thank you very much.
Because I know I was swimming today with a lady that's 97 years old, and I'm at the aquatic center. Mm-hmm. She still drives and is phenomenal, mm-hmm. but only back and forth to the pool and once a week to Publix, because she loves her Publix. But she was talking about how just important it is to get your paper in her driveway as a connection to what was going on. because the printed word, the feeling and the ads and being able to touch it is something that's very important to her.
Yeah.
And she wanted me to tell you thank you, by the way.
I appreciate that. The couple quick things about that is that our current subscription donation is to the schools. So when you go log on to subscribe, you actually can click on a school and pick one of your choice, and we'll make a donation to that school right now, like to the PTO in elementary schools, for example. But also, it's interesting because we just had an audit that did they did a phone survey. About 400 people, responded in this survey, and of the readers of the paper, it's actually fairly evenly distributed over the decades, like 35 to 45, 45 to 55, and so on, up until 75.
You're talking age
groups, yeah, where it's actually pretty well distributed for who reads the paper. And I honestly thought that it would be much more heavily weighted to the older community, but it's really pretty well distributed. 34 and under, it's very little. So, and I think partly that's just because there's not a lot of like homeowner, these are who my taxes are going to, these are who's deciding my taxes. So all the city politics matters a lot more when you're a homeowner and you're paying taxes. I think that's really the biggest decision maker there. But it is, I think, read by 35 and up.
Now, in that data collection, and that's critical. I was a data guy for many years, and half my job was gathering data to know, is this value or this not value? In that data, did they look at online participation? And did people respond? And I would bet maybe that's where that lower age group is possibly, hopefully getting
Yeah, that's a good
something.
question. I think that it's also, I'd have to look at the numbers again. I don't remember,
Right.
But I think that it's also online or in print. This is where maybe it's not as important the medium. It's more like what the content is. And so I think for the most part, it's our 35
Right.
plus that care about most of what we're doing. But
So I have to go on a record and say we are enjoying another beautiful thunder afternoon here in Palm Coast. So if you hear someone upstairs bowling, moving furniture, whatever it is, we're safe and we're going to continue. So Brian, you talked about your history. Mm-hmm. You share with us what's happening with the paper. I'd like to turn the page and talk about Palm Coast.
okay.
And what I'd like to know, because of all of the reporters that I've been exposed to and talked to, and I sit in city meetings like you and observe everything that's going on, and you being here much longer than me, I've been here a little over 5 years. What's your gut? You think Palm Coast is going to make that that transition from that retirement community to trying to put on their big boy pants and become a city and grow in that way? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, the data, if you look at the data, the average age in Palm Coast is not going down. I mean, there are more young people that are moving here, but not as fast as retirees are moving here. So in Florida, I think these numbers are about right. There's about 15% that's 65 plus. In Palm Coast, it's about 30% that are 65 plus, and that's not projected to slow down. So I don't know that there's really a difference between I don't know if that's one of the reasons that it's been harder to get like those big employers that we're looking for, is that there's not as big of a working community. But the thing is, we're also growing in population quite a bit. Now we're at 109,000, 110,000 in Palm Coast. So even if 30% are 65 plus, just by the sheer growth of the community, you're going to get a critical workforce that's going to come as long as the population keeps growing that way. And whether that's good or bad, it depends on your perspective. But I do think that ultimately things will catch up, but it may not be, I don't know that it's ever going to look like, your stereotypical city. I mean, there's still going to according to the data, I mean, people are moving in that are retiring still. So it's one of the best places to retire. And so I think that'll probably always be part of our identity.
Yeah, I had this conversation with Teresa Ponateri from the dais, and I was presenting this perception. People retire here to not move into a city. They want to move into a retirement community.
Yeah.
They want the pace to be a certain way. They want the cost of living to be a certain way. They don't want bumper to bumper traffic. Most people left that area. And in your exposure to multiple places, we're far from that. So the feedback I get from the older community in which I'm exposed to is they don't want this explosion in growth. And I come back and explain to them that in 2008, Palm Coast experienced the worst case scenario with taxation by property taxes. And I think we're still in the 90s to where the residential property owners are paying like 90% of the infrastructure needs the city has.
Yep.
And oh my God, if the governor had been successful in removing property taxes, have a conversation with politicians about that, or the fact that maybe your property taxes are going, or your value, your homes, or the resale, in which I've talked to, and I know you have, that it's kind of flat right now. Have more inventory, then we can move. People that really need to move are cutting the prices of their homes. And every other city or county has budgeted for 25, 26, knowing they're expecting to have less money, except for one group, Palm Coast. They believe that their income from property taxes and from permits and fees are going to meet or exceed last year. Well, the numbers don't support that for this year. And so I worked for the Boeing company for a while, and I was part of a team that went out and found supplier vendors in small areas and helped them grow. And one of the first things we did was we looked at employment. You know, if I put a 100-man shop in Palm Coast, where are those 100 people going to come from to come work in that facility? They're not there.
Well, this is part of the identity struggle that we have in Palm Coast, is talking about, and I tried to, I identified this somewhat in the town hall story with Mayor Norris, and I called it the anti-growth, pro-affordability paradox. Got some flack for that on Facebook, but I kind of see it as
true.
like, I kind of see it as like fundamentally two competing things. Because if you don't increase the number of houses, then the supply doesn't go up enough to meet the demand, and you're going to have a hard time being affordable. But a lot of people just really don't want the houses in. And I think that what I really wonder is this: do people really want Palm Coast to be affordable? I think a lot of people actually don't, because they're set. You know, let's say you are 50 or 60 or 70 years old, and you made your money and you're retired or you're in your career. You like the idea that Palm Coast is for that group and for that age bracket. And you don't necessarily, you don't want to bend over backward to try to make sure that there's more affordable housing for people. That kind of changes the character of what you wanted and grew into. And maybe if someone says, hey, I'm 25, I'm 30, and I can't afford to live here, the attitude is like, well, then maybe you shouldn't live here if you can't afford to live here. It's not for everybody, and not every city has to be for everybody. We don't have to make sure that everyone can live in Boca Raton or make sure that everybody can afford to live in Manhattan. Not everybody can live in Palm Coast, and that's what it is. That sounds very like elitist, and it's kind of uncomfortable, kind of almost class warfare a little bit, where like, what about like the teacher who is making $47,000 or $50,000 and, you know, has a hard time making it, or even less. What do you say to them? And like, we kind of do a little lip service, like we want to have all of our teachers live here and all our firefighters live here and all of our other service employees be able to live in our community, but not enough to like really try to inspire more affordable housing, because that changes the character too much. So that's kind of the wrestle that we're at right now in Palm Coast, and I wonder how many people are really that's really, I think, in the long term, like if that group that wants more affordability kind of starts to outnumber the group that is saying, no, let's keep our code enforcement super strong, let's keep it as much like an HOA as we can, that's why we like it. Right now I think there's more people, at least half, that feel that way, that don't want the affordability to keep, to grow up and bring other things with it. So I think that's kind of one of the identity struggles that we have, and it's kind of unusual because we are 30% plus 65 and older.
You bring up a good point, and I've lived in areas, as I know you have, that most people that work in an area commute.
Yeah.
I mean, I commuted 50 miles when I lived in the Northwest to work at the Boeing company because I couldn't afford anything close to, and Provo is getting like that too. Look at Jackson.
Is that okay? Is that just the way it is? And so
I think it is. I do think, I have this conversation with my son all the time. He lives in Oakland, California. He just bought a home, starter home. Him and his wife, brand new, my first grandson, $1 million. Both of them are as house poor as they're ever going to be. And they had family help because her family lives there, and that's the reason they're there. We all have connections. But I was having this conversation. You're both young. You both have college degrees. You could live anywhere in the country to where the value of your work equals the quality of and the young people. It was like I was talking a fairy story or something. They've given up on this perception that if I go and move to nowhere, Kansas, and I teach at a high school and I make enough money to where I have a quality of life, and Kansas has its pros and cons, but I raise my kids there, is that the dream? I don't think a lot of these younger people that I'm talking to see it that way. So
I do think it's natural to...
Well, having 5 kids, you're having this conversation yet?
Well, I think it's natural to expect that as you're growing up, that your quality of life will be similar to what it was when you're, say, a teenager. And by then, your parents are probably mid-career,
right?
Not starter career. When they were starter career, they were living in, squeezing by in a little apartment. Yeah. You don't remember those days, because you were too young. But what should people expect? I mean, when I was in college, I had roommates, right? So if you're making, say, $40,000 or so in Palm Coast, and the only way to afford it is to have a roommate, that's life.
Exactly.
You can't really expect anything else. The irony is that these places that you're talking about, like I had to commute 50 miles away to go somewhere. That destination was like the expensive city. Is Palm Coast the expensive city? I mean, Palm Coast is, by comparison, very affordable to live in, and I think that's also just part of the whole, state of the economy in general. That everything is more expensive. So,
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but
Yeah.
I've always felt that Palm Coast, besides being a retirement community, is also a bedroom community of other larger cities. I guarantee you there are people living here that commute to Jacksonville
Yeah.
or commute to Orlando.
I think it's like 40% of the workforce does
yeah,
that.
it's crazy. And when I've been following a little bit of this long term with the Loop Road and all of this, and there's a plan, a 10-year plan for Suncoast Rail to take the spur up from where it is and go into Jacksonville and possibly have one or two stops, one down in Palatka and Bunnell, and maybe one up near the top of the Loop Road to to fill in those commutes. But I'll be long gone by the time all that happens here. So when you're putting together a paper and you're editing and you're going and you're interfacing with all of these people, I'm just so impressed with how you do an interview. And I try to mirror that. And there's others I find that do that very well. Gavin Newsom is doing some podcasts now, and he's going into Fox, and he's going into those tough things. And they have friendly conversations, right? Mm-hmm. And it presents, for me anyway, hope that people that are of different mindsets can get together and talk. And you do a good job of not showing your cards, and you're neutral in all aspects, and you're just asking phenomenal questions, getting people to share things that sometimes I'm like catching some conversations like you did with the superintendent. And I just love the fact that you got her to admit that there's well over 100 students in Flagler County School District that are misusing the voucher system. And she said it so comfortably. Do you think she even was like acknowledging it's an issue?
Well,
because Greco was like, Sam Greco, our representative, was on the phone. And I highly recommend, it's on YouTube, Free for All Fridays with I can never remember the radio station's name. WNZF. But Brian does a phenomenal job.
You're from the West. You thought it was a K. Okay.
Yeah, I am. Again, WK. Anyway.
Well, first of all, I believe that specific line of questioning was really David Ayers leading that one. So he's a very good interviewer. His style is a lot more, I think.
He loves to tee people up.
Yeah,
for sure.
he's trying to make it a. His mentality is more like, let's make it entertaining also. And but I think that when it comes to interviewing and trying to like ask questions, I think what I hope is that my questions are always in pursuit of something worthwhile, something good, and never to demean or catch somebody off guard just to make them look bad. So it really comes back to like that value set of empathy, and our mission statement is to build bridges of understanding. So if my goal is to try to help everybody know where you're coming from, the understanding is always going to be like, you probably have a good reason. You're a smart guy. You don't, Lashaka Moore, she's very intelligent. If she feels one way about something, then there's a good reason for it. So I want to know what that reason is. It's not like, I'm trying to point out the flaws in your argument. That's not my motivation ever.
And you pull that off really well.
But
they end up doing it anyway.
Well, it's very genuine. I thought about this before, because I think sometimes I see other news outlets locally, but also obviously nationally, that there's a lot of value in like the opinion pieces that come out, and sometimes like in the New York Times, those are the most widely read things. But I think that my own kind of like temperament is more like, I find that finding something new that changes my mind on something, that like there's a new wrinkle to that, there's another angle that I didn't even know, that's where the discovery and the excitement is, like the intellectual kind of exploration, more so than like, I'm going to stand up for this and I'm going to, try to persuade you one way or the other. I think that there are some things that I would, stand on the hill and fight for, but it's mostly what I just said: build bridges of understanding, try to seek for peacemaking among the community, and not ever try to like put somebody else down, because again, they probably have a good reason, at least in their mind, and that's good for the community to try to understand each other. And I think that's what makes it a better place to live, not always feeling like people are out to get me, or that all this whole other half of the community is just idiots because they don't agree with me. I think that's a very unhealthy kind of attitude.
Well, and you do that very successfully.
Well, thank you.
And I appreciate that tact as well, because I gave up a long time ago believing that I could change a belief in someone. I could present them stacks and stacks of data, and it won't work. It won't change. It's all about presenting them a commonality of a connection of, we both live in Palm Coast, or we both pay high taxes, or we both see an element that's happening which is non-political at all. And then you find that basis as a talking point, and then you can expand on that. So I just want you to know that I, for one, think that those that will come at you just because you're in a media, we get it too sometimes, where people aren't happy with what we say. And that comes with the risk of being public, and being out there like we are now.
Sometimes that is definitely the worst part about the job, is because, you do open yourself up for a lot of heated criticism sometimes. I also think that part of like an interview and just the approach to, this kind of idea of trying to understand both sides it's the concept of saving face, in a negotiation. If you're trying to defeat somebody, it's human nature for someone to get more defensive,
Sure.
to back up. And if you got them in a corner, it can be human nature to then want to whack the hammer and say like, and that's why, I've caught you in a lie, right? And sometimes it needs to be done, but for the most part, I think what we really want to do is get to a place where you're backed into a corner. How can I be creative enough to ask you the kind of questions that are going to allow you to come back out of the corner and rejoin society in a way that's going to make everybody feel like they got a win-win? And that's one thing that I tried to do recently with the Mayor Norris situation. So, he's been highly criticized and highly defended, by his supporters. But to me, the fact that he is kind of like pulled back from a lot of ceremonial roles as mayor, how does he get back out of that situation without feeling like he had to surrender and look bad, right? That's just human nature. You don't want to do that. So it makes it harder to make progress. So one way that I thought would be a way to help him feel like he's making progress, but also have the community gain and move on, was to say, Mayor Norris, we would invite you to share your vision for where we go now. The moratorium was his main thing for quite a while.
And that's kind of dead in the water now.
That's dead in the water. Yeah, it's not going to happen. So now what? I don't think that means like, now, you have a lame duck tenure. You're still the mayor. A lot of people voted for you. So let's stop like feeling like you're trapped in a corner and be the victim. Let's now find a way to move out in front of that and make it feel like, okay, you're still the leader of our city. You're still the mayor. Share with us your vision of what's the next step after the moratorium didn't work out. Where do we go next? And not make it, help him feel like he is being heard in a different way. That's one thing that the newspaper can do, is help people feel heard. But at the same time, we don't really want to just keep hearing about how bad it was that the moratorium didn't happen. The rest of the community is kind of like, obviously it didn't work. So that just, if we're just continuing that battle, then that's not helping anything. So that's one example of kind of putting that principle in. How can we make the community happy that we have a new vision? How do we make the mayor know that he's being listened to? Whether that's ever where the other takes me up on that, I don't know. But that's kind of that's the impulse behind doing something like that.
And that's a perfect opening to allow him to turn the page, to get people to hear what he wants to do tomorrow, next week, instead of fighting losing battles in the past. Mm-hmm. And as I'm always saying to everyone, you cannot win a fight that occurred yesterday. Mm-hmm. You're wasting your time. There's no value to it. And so I applaud you for trying to do that. And he actually called me out in that to confirm the media bias of what his perception was. And it's not true in most media. You can just be so absorbed into certain elements of things that you forget to see what his duty is and what his responsibility is and moving forward. So hopefully he'll do that. But unfortunately, I know of and have talked with him long before he got elected. Mm-hmm. And he's very passionate and has been. And you and I have sat in city council meetings where he was in the back of the room making comments toward Mayor Alphen and others. He's a passionate guy. Mm-hmm. And he's very reactionary. And he is that person you were describing of, I'm boxing a corner and I'm just coming out swinging at anybody and everybody. And hopefully he's learning from this. I saw some of that. It felt like some of that was in that town hall meeting. Mm-hmm. There was, even though he was surrounded by supporters, there were a few that asked him questions. And I think maybe there's some hope. We can only hope. Mm-hmm. But so what do you think? That's a great lead into this next. What do you see as the vision for Palm Coast? You're kind of in touch with a lot of different things. Nobody's telling us about these big, huge companies they want to bring mm-hmm. in. And so far, they're 0 and 2 with the ones. And this data center is kind of and I do love your data, your tunnel pictures and all the data around the ocean. But 8 jobs? What was it, 8 or 10 jobs that were coming in? I'm
not sure exactly how
whatever
many,
that was going to be. 11 jobs. What's your gut tell you? What do you feel? If you could look?
Well, I
won't hold you to the record.
Yeah, I mean,
we're all just guessing what tomorrow's going to be.
So I went to a little presentation, a speech to the builders community several months ago, and this is a guy who is like a University of Florida economic development, guru, and he said that it's typical that a city would spend like 1% to 4% on economic development incentives, and we were a fraction of a percent. And so I do think that the city of Palm Coast... They heard that
because they tripled the money in this budget.
So. Yes. And so I think that is... there used to be, when I got here in 2010, economic development was like the hot topic in the government. There was a public-private entity called Enterprise Flagler, which was part of like Enterprise Florida, and that has now gone away. But it was all like, how do we get some of these bigger employers to come into town? And unless you are willing to put some incentives together, some of these big businesses, they're not looking for incentives about like some tax breaks down the road. They're looking for millions of dollars of cash. That's what's going to take to get them there. And those are risky because maybe they come in and the jobs don't materialize, and then everybody looks bad. Or there's been dozens, I believe, like in the dozens of inquiries to move to Palm Coast, and they're looking for buildings that could be 100,000 square feet, 150,000 square feet. The biggest building we have is like 10,000 square feet, yeah. And there's like one of them. So if the city is really serious about bringing in industry, based on some of those numbers, it seems like we may need to take some risks, partner with some investors, or just build a couple buildings that are going to make it easy for a business to come in and inhabit it, and or be willing to put together some kind of cash incentive type packages, at least be willing to entertain those. And those will face incredible opposition from a lot of people in the community. One, because, wait a minute, I moved here because it is a retirement community. The last thing we want is a big old business that's going to bring a whole bunch of young families in. That's not really why we moved here. So I think it's going to take some political courage and or political capital that someone's going to have to run on that and try to get a mandate to do it. Or maybe, I don't know what it'll take, but it's been going along now since I've been here for 15 years and plus, because we've never really had a lot of industry move in. It's going to take some serious willpower and determination to make that happen, and to overcome, if there is resident opposition, to still do it anyway. And that would kind of change some of the fabric of Palm Coast. Whether that's what people want, I don't know. I guess that's what the way we know that as a community is the people we vote in. If the people who vote in say this is what we're going to do, and we vote for them, then I guess that's what we wanted, right? At least that's what the voting public is willing to do. But that all is the backdrop to the biggest opportunity for some of that to happen, which is on the west side, Project Magellan. It's a $500 million investment. None of it's residential. It's all like, commercial entertainment district west of US 1. And will that then lead to more homes? Yeah, I mean, there's going to be homes on the west side of US 1. But that, whether the city council and the city staff and those owners will bring all that to fruition or not, is kind of like a pretty big, weather vane, I guess, for how what's going to happen after that, because I think that's the biggest economic development opportunity that I've seen in our area. It's probably ever. I mean, I don't think there's ever been that big of an investment to happen, but
you must know more about it than the rest of us, because they're not sharing any.
All that is on our website. Like that's public. Project Magellan. It's like I forget how many acres, but it's just a portion of all the land that's out there. But of the $500 million investment, it's like $250 million of like construction capital, equipment or development. But it would lead to, according to them, about $20 million a year of local tax dollars, split up between school board, county, city, and so that makes a big impact every year. And it's the type of thing you're talking about. Like if we have 90%, I did some math and I could be wrong, but I think it would, but even that would only bring it down to like 88%. It's still 88% residential. So we need like 10 of those to really get us into a more healthy situation, right, if that's our goal as a community.
And that's, that is where I think the biggest challenge is the transition of each elected group. Each group comes in, the retirement people coming in. There's no set plan. There's no set vision. Half the citizens here like it what it is or want to slow it back. Half of them want to see growth in those kind of projects. And how it turns out, I mean, living in so many areas, the fact that Palm Coast is in such a sweetheart deal location of, my wife recently pointed out, she goes, did you know that the exit there on the highway is the closest exit to a beach on the entire 800 and some miles of Highway 95. I'm a West Coaster.
Okay.
I get them mixed up. And I was like, you're kidding. And she showed me that the exit at Palm Coast is 3.2 miles from the ocean. Closer than anywhere on 95 from Maine to Key West.
That not only that, but on US 1, on A1A, there's very little area where you can drive on A1A and actually turn to your left if you're driving south and see the ocean. Mostly there's buildings in the way, and there's nothing in Flagler Beach,
right?
Because they've kept their height restriction down, and just the way it is.
Right.
I mean, that might be in jeopardy with
But you got
all the erosion.
You got A1A, then you got 95, then you got Palm Coast, then you've got US 1, which go north on US 1 and get up into St. Augustine, and it's strip malls and residents, and I mean, it's full of businesses. And then a lot of people don't even know what we're talking about with the loop road going even west to and beyond the railroad tracks. So I wonder, and I talked to Ray Tyner and some of those product of what is it we're missing to make that attraction? And it was exactly what you said. They're all looking for sweetheart tax deals and employment. And now one of the concerns is most of these big companies need utilities. They need wastewater. They need fresh water. They need sewer. And we're kind of behind the curve on getting those things done. And then as I talked to a builder who was looking at the decisions they just made on all of the impact fees based on, they claim, false data, false narrative of the emergency situation they're in, to double it or even higher in some cases, to where a laundromat, a daycare center would cost $20,000-$30,000 in impact fees to bring it in. So we want businesses, but we're going to make it very difficult for you to come up with. Does that not? I don't
It's back to that paradox of like we're anti-growth, but we're pro-affordability in certain ways.
Exactly.
And so, but the other thing that I think is interesting is that split of the 90-10. Of all the infrastructure and all the city services, 90% of that is paid for by residential taxes. It's been like that since I got here.
Yeah.
And
it was designed like that.
And what have we seen with the tax rate ever since then?
Flat.
It's been basically the same, hovering around 4 mils in the city of Palm Coast, which is one of the lowest, if not the lowest, city of our size in the whole state. We don't have a whole bunch of other fees on top of it like some do. Our county is not exorbitant tax rate either. So somehow we've been able to just skate through here without the catastrophic tax increases that we have been warned about all along. Yes, some things have gone up, like the utilities have been going up and things like that, but they're going up everywhere else too.
So you live in Palm Coast?
I do.
Do you know what your total millage rate to live in Palm Coast is?
I don't know, somewhere around 22-ish or 20.
18.3.
Okay.
Is what the AI tells me in adding up all of them. Most people have no idea.
Yeah.
That they just get this tax bill for $8,000-$9,000 or whatever it is, depending on, because of the high cost of living here.
High compared to what?
Well, and I'm going back to your.
Why do people retire here? It's because they were paying way more than that up north.
Exactly. Oh.
They sold their house and had like cash to come down and almost buy their house in cash or half of it, and they come here to Palm Coast and like, finally we escaped up in the Northeast, and here we are, and 2 years later there's a little more traffic, and it becomes like now our expectations have changed. That's probably caricaturizing some of the responses, but it was interesting even in the town hall meeting with the mayor the other day. A couple people raised their hand and said something about how concerned they are about growth, and they said they moved here 2 years ago
Yeah, I know.
or 18 months
And
ago.
what was his response? We are not a retirement community. He
But
said that multiple times.
But if we moved here 2 years ago, or even I moved here, 15 years ago, I moved into a home that was platted by ITT in like 1975. All those homes, a developer got set up and got ready, built the roads, put in the utilities so we could go in and build these homes. I didn't build, I bought a pre-existing home. But we're all basically in that same boat where we are, benefiting basically from ITT's investment 50 years ago. And a lot of people who move in are just building on one of those lots that was set up. So
And they're still coming. I've got infill lots around.
yeah, there's 7,000 of them
now
around the city that still
that
are
are
being
getting
built.
filled in. Brian, we could do this all day.
Indeed.
Because this is what we do, isn't it? So, any final thoughts? Anything you want to say about that paper, or what you want to get across to? Because I try real hard. I'm sticking with and trying to reach out to those 100,000+ people in Palm Coast in the media that I'm getting into. But what do you think?
Well, I just want to reiterate our mission statement, and that is that the Palm Coast Observer is here to help build bridges of understanding, and we're trying to be as accurate and compelling as possible. Our goal is to build community spirit. So that's why you see a lot of things that, I think the virtue, the nature of a community newspaper is that it does that. When we know what we have in common because of what's in the community paper, that's what makes a community possible. Community and communication have the same root word. So without the communication, there really is no community. And that's what we're trying to do, is be a method for doing that, just like what you're doing here. When we know what we have in common, then we feel more connected to each other. And so I think that's what drives what we're doing in the newspaper. That's why I want the circulation to increase, because then more people feel connected. That's why I want to make sure that what is covered in the newspaper is something that everybody can relate to. So if you want to subscribe, you can go to our website and click the subscribe button, observerlocalnews.com, and we will be donating $20 to a school of your choice if you do that in the next couple months. And so again, thanks for having me on, and thank you for watching so that you can get more connected to the community.
Excellent, Brian.
Yep.
I think you're hitting every one of those points. I cannot support louder the opportunity for you guys to educate yourself on the things that are going on every day. As Brian knows, the turnout for city meetings where your dollars are getting spent, where conversations are going on, is not very well attended. And you need to be aware of it. You need to read the paper. You need to pay attention. You need to participate, because without it, you have no say. You have no voice. And that's why we're here to try to educate you and get you motivated to just ponder what's going on. So thanks a lot, guys. Brian?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for coming. I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks a lot.